What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Week 4 starts and sits. We'll be taking a look at every backfield today, talking about which running backs you should be starting and sitting in Week 4. Before we do that, of course, have to start things off like usual with the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat was through 3 weeks. Mark Andrews leads all tight ends with 5 end zone targets. Who has the second most? And the answer was Jimmy Graham, which definitely surprised me. And Matt Levine was the first to get that one right. Today's stat, only 3 players have at least 20 touches in all 3 weeks. Derrick Henry, Ezekiel Elliott, and who is the third? All right, let's start things off with the Thursday matchup between the Jets and the Broncos. This game has the lowest total on the week, so I guess nice getting it out of the way on Thursday night. But it should at least be close. The Broncos are currently very slight road favorites. On the Broncos side, check the status of Lindsey before the game kicks off. If he's out again, then Gordon is a much stronger play. If he's active, then I would want to hear about any potential snap count they might have him on before we kind of know the value of Melvin Gordon. I would not be playing Lindsey regardless, even if he's active and they say no snap count. I would not trust him, so I would not play him at all. But that news will impact the value of Melvin Gordon, so we kind of need to know that. In general, I would think even if he does come back, he will be limited, and so I think you can still play Melvin Gordon. The Jets have allowed a lot of fantasy points to running backs, but it's not because they're a really bad run defense. They actually rank second in rush defense DVOA. They just get stomped every game, and so teams are able to run the ball a ton, and that's how you rack up fantasy points. So not a bad run defense, just if you're losing every game by a lot of points, teams are going to run the ball on you a lot. This game is projected to be close, like I said, so it's unlikely the Broncos are able to just build a massive lead and bleed the clock out. Assuming Lindsey is out, I think you have to play Gordon as like a mid to low end running back too. If he plays, then we again will need to see the role, but I think I would drop Melvin Gordon to a flex play, and then Lindsey, like I said, we're just not playing him. On the Jets side, they are home, but while the Broncos defense isn't what it used to be, it's still like not a good matchup for the Jets, and especially in a game with such a low total. I just can't imagine wanting to start any Jets running backs outside of like a 16-team league, where maybe you could start Gore or maybe take a shot on the Michael Pirine, but I doubt any of you guys are in a situation where you need to start a Jets running back. Ravens at the football team is next, and the Ravens are a massive road favorite in this one. And the total is relatively high, although most of those points are coming on the Baltimore side because of how much they're supposed to win by. I tweeted this out the other day, but if you look at the snap share of the Ravens' 3 running backs, I don't see how you could trust any of them. They're all playing about a third of snaps. Obviously, Gus Edwards gets a little bit less than that, but both Dobbins and Ingram aren't going too much higher than a third. And so when you look at it, even Ingram's only getting like 7 to 10 carries and basically no targets each week. So you're just hoping one of these guys falls into the end zone. And they're probably going to need to fall into the end zone twice to really be worth it as plays and really to make up for the risk in starting them. So this is also a relatively difficult matchup. They'll be playing ahead, so that helps. But Washington, even without Young, is going to have a really, really nice front 7. And so they're not just going to get easy yards even though they're ahead. So the volume would be higher. I think they'll be less efficient on average. Ingram's the only one you could even consider starting, but even he is just like a flex play at best, and one that I wouldn't feel comfortable with. On the Washington side, we continue to see them slowly expand the role of Gibson. Unfortunately, it's just not a good matchup. I wish it were. Maybe we can start using him in the flex, but as nearly 2 touchdown underdogs, I don't know. This isn't the spot that I want to be playing Gibson. I have him in a league where we have 2 running backs and 2 flex spots, and I think he's 5th for me. I think he's the last player on my bench that I'm probably just not going to play because he is still only going to see in that 12 to maybe 10 even, 10 to 14 touch range. And in such a difficult matchup with limited scoring chances, I mean, the total's relatively high, but they're only projected 19 of those points. I would just try and find someone else. Next up, we've got the Chargers at the Bucks. This is another game with a relatively low total, around 43, 44 points, depending on the site. And the Bucks are touchdown home favorites. On the Chargers side, Austin Eckler is just a weekly must start. I do not care who they're playing. Joshua Kelly is fine in the flex in more of a deeper format, but I would probably keep him on the bench if you're in a 10 or a 12 team league. But once you get into 14 team leagues, I think he is fine to play because even though he is technically the backup running back, they run the ball so much. There is still enough volume for Kelly to be viable, and they are willing to use him in the goal line, in the red zone. They are willing to throw him the ball. And of course, getting Herbert in there is definitely an upgrade to the offense. So I don't think he's just this horrible play, but in a 12-team league, I hope you have better options. If we look at the Bucs side in this one, it's honestly a mess. It looked like Leonard Fournette was going to take over as the lead back, but then he was outsnapped by Jones in week 3, and even McCoy got in there for a bit. It wasn't a ton, but he still had some targets, and he was still taking some work. This is a good spot if we could count on one of these guys to just definitely get 60, 65% of the work, but the workload might just be impossible to predict at this point. I mean, I don't feel confident saying that Jones or Fournette is going to get more work. I have no idea what's going to happen. I don't think anyone can say that they know for sure. And if we even assume that the split is relatively like we saw in weeks 2 and 3, that means these guys are going to get like 10 to 12 touches. And like I said, kind of with some other running backs, like that's fine, but I hope you have better options. Like if you're starting Fournette, realize he might get 10 to 12 touches, and then you're just praying he falls into the end zone, which could happen, but that's just randomness, and you'd like to not win or lose your matchups on randomness. You'd like to start players who are getting more touches. So I think Fournette, Ronald Jones, if you need them in a 14-team league, they're fine in the flex since they are touchdown home favorites, but I would probably keep them on the bench as well in a 10 or a 12-team league. Seahawks at Dolphins is the next one up. This game has a massive over-under, and Seattle is roughly a touchdown road favorite, which you don't see all the time. Usually, if someone's a touchdown favorite, usually home, not on the road. So Seahawks, of course, we know why that is with Russell Wilson as their quarterback. But if this game were in Seattle, there's no chance the Dolphins winning that game. At least now that it's home, maybe the game can be a little bit closer than the public thinks. For Seattle, Carson is likely going to miss this week, but keep an eye on that. We can't know for sure until they declare him out, which as of recording this, they have not done. Hopefully we know sometime on Friday or on Saturday his status. I think he's closer to doubtful, but again, just pay attention. If he's out, it means we can look at both Carlos Hyde and Travis Homer. Homer offers more receiving upside than Hyde does, but it's unlikely the Seahawks are like really trying to play in catch-up mode, so they probably won't need to throw a bunch of dump-offs, and that's where he would excel a little bit more. And while they've been throwing a lot this season, it hasn't really been to the running backs. It's been more to the wide receivers. So it's not something that I'm looking to attack, is the receiving upside of Travis Homer. If you wanted to start either of them in the flex, I guess you can. Just don't be shocked when they basically split the workload, with Hyde having a little bit more touchdown equity. And like I said, Homer having a little bit more upside in the receiving game. So maybe in a full PPR league, you do lean a little bit more towards Homer. Also, if Carson ends up being active, I think we have to assume he's good to go. Again, listen to reports, but if he's active, I'm playing him, and I'm not playing either of Hyde or Homer. As for the Dolphins, Myles Gaskins has basically just taken over this backfield. Howard is purely a touchdown vulture, and Breida is just not being used enough at all. I think both those guys are fine to drop in pretty much all formats. I do have that page up on the site now, so if you want to see who I'm comfortable dropping in like 12, 14, 16 team leagues, I kind of have a page up and a big table that highlights that for each team. But I would be fine dropping Howard and Breida. Myles has been really good, though. I mean, he had 27 touches on Thursday night. that didn't necessarily translate into an amazing game in fantasy, but if you're getting that sort of volume, like, you got to be starting players getting 27 touches. Now, I don't think he's going to see 27 touches every week, and he's not going to see that this week, but that's his upside, and they clearly want him to be the guy, and he's got upside in the receiving game, so I think that if you got him, you're playing him in the flex this week. Next up, Saints at Lions. The Saints are only 4-point road favorites. I thought that split would be a little wider, but of course not having Michael Thomas is going to hurt. And of course we've talked about how Breeze looks a little bit off this season. And this is yet another game with a total north of 50 this week. For the Saints, always start Alvin Kamara. For the Lions, I have no idea what they're doing. It seems like they're just going to keep feeding Adrian Peterson and benching Swift, which I don't understand. But until there starts being like a consistent split in the touches, I'm not starting any of them, especially in a pretty difficult matchup against a strong Saints run defense. And I'll do the same caveat as usual. If you start Peterson in a 14-team league, that's fine. But if you're in a 10 or a 12-team league, I would really like a better option than Peterson, even in the flex. Speaking of games, with a total north of 50, we have another one when the Browns travel to Dallas to take on the Cowboys. This game has a projected total of 55.5 points right now, with Dallas as 4 to 5 point home favorites. And as I've said in these last 2 weeks, we are starting players in matchups like this. There are going to be a lot of yards, a lot of touchdowns to be had, and both of these offenses are relatively condensed. So we're starting everyone. We're starting Chubb, Hunt, Zeke, but also Odell, Landry, Cooper, Gallup, Lamb. Landry is probably the only one that might be questionable, but I am okay playing him in the flex because of this game environment. This is a running back video, so just to reiterate, you're starting Chubb, Hunt, and Zeke in all formats. Next game isn't quite at a 50 total, but it's at 49, so still high scoring, and that's Jaguars at Bengals. For the Jaguars, James Robinson has been amazing to start the season, and while other backs could return to the team soon, this is Robinson's backfield, and you need to just be starting him every week right now, especially against the Bengals run defense that ranks 29th in rush defense DVOA and 31st in yards per carry allowed. As for Thompson, that's not the kind of play that I personally like to make, so I wouldn't be starting him outside of like 16-team full PPR leagues, maybe in a 14-team full PPR league if you had Saquon Barkley and Le'Veon Bell and you just need someone in your flex or something to just throw in there, maybe. But I don't want to play Chris Thompson. On the Bengals side, we've got our boy Joe Mixon. Unfortunately, the Jaguars rank 31st in rush defense DVOA, 15th in yards per carry allowed, and the Bengals are slight home favorites. So given that this game also has a relatively high total, like I mentioned before, like if Joe just blows in this one, then like I don't know what to tell you. Like honestly, like, I think you have to start him as a running back 2 this week and just cross your fingers and hope he plays better, because there's no excuses at this point. This is not a strong Jaguars run defense. He is a favorite. He is at home. There is a lot of points to go around. Like if he fails in this spot, I don't know what to tell you. Like I said, I really just don't. Colts at Bears is next, and this game has a 44-point total, so kind of low. The Colts are 2.5 point road favorites. This one is pretty easy to break down. You're starting Jonathan Taylor every week, and Hines is really only in playing games that we think the Colts are going to throw the ball a lot, which I don't really see happening this week, so I keep him on the bench. As for the Bears, with Cohen done for the season, David Montgomery might approach that same status as Jonathan Taylor. I am not saying that he's going to be the same player in fantasy as Jonathan Taylor, but that same status of like, you're probably just playing David Montgomery every week because he's going to have such a high floor, and now that Foles is the quarterback, the offense should be a little bit better. It's not quite a slam dunk. It will depend on the matchup a little bit, but I think he is a weekly running back 2 moving forward, and someone that you're only benching if you have awesome running backs. Up next, we've got Cardinals at Panthers, another game north of 50 for the total. This one's at 52, and the Cardinals are 3.5-point road favorites. The Panthers rank last in rush defense DVOA, 21st in yards per carry allowed, have allowed 124 rushing yards per game, and 27 actual points per game. This is not a good defense, and the game is going to have a lot of plays run since both teams are willing and able to play fast. That is all great news for Kenyon Drake, who, while only ranking 24th in fantasy points through the first 3 weeks among running backs, of course, he's still averaging 20 touches per game. So I know he has been frustrating to own so far, but he's still a high-end running back too, and someone that you should probably still be starting regardless of who you have. On the Panthers side, Mike Davis turned in a pretty productive week in fantasy without Christian McCaffrey. The Cardinals are like an average run defense, not fantastic, not horrible, pretty middle of the pack. And the Panthers are at home, which I guess helps. I would consider Davis like a mid to low end running back too this week, someone that I can understand if you want to keep on the bench because you have better options, but someone that I'm more than comfortable playing as my running back too or playing in the flex. Giants at Rams is up next. This game has a 48-point total, and the Rams are massive, 13-point home favorites. This is one of the biggest spreads we'll see all season, on par with the Ravens spread this week, and that just does not bode well for the Giants running backs. It was really just a two-man committee between Gallman and Freeman last week, which we had talked about heading into the week. A lot of people were going to fall into that trap of just trusting Dion Lewis because he had all those touches when Barkley went down, but not look at the fact that Gallman was a healthy scratch that week and was going to get more run moving forward. So now we've got this gross committee of Gallman, of Freeman, of Lewis. I do still think that this is Freeman's backfield if he isn't horrible. He could absolutely end up being horrible, in which case it would just turn into a horrible situation for fantasy as well. But I think that if you wanted one running back on this team, it's Freeman. Would I start any of them this week in any format, in any league size? Probably not. I think that your team just deserves a loss if you start any of them. On the Rams side, it does depend on the status of Cam Akers. Malcolm Brown can't really be trusted regardless. I don't care if Akers plays, doesn't play. You're just praying that he falls into the end zone, which again, I don't like doing. I don't like starting running backs where you need to just get lucky. I want guys who are actually going to get carries and get targets. If Akers is out, then Henderson is a very strong play and would likely be a running back too. If Akers does play, then Henderson is of course not as strong of a play. He'll have a lower ceiling, a lower floor, but I would still be comfortable playing him in the flex. He has looked fantastic this season, and he had a really good game and not a good matchup. In Buffalo was not an easy place to play, and he made it look easy. He had a phenomenal game, and so even if they have Akers active, I do not see a scenario where they're just like, all right, Akers, go in there, we're giving you 20 touches, right? I think Henderson has a lot of touch upside, even if Akers is healthy. And so regardless, I think you can play him. But again, Akers out, running back two. Akers in, Henderson is more of a flex. And again, I'm not starting Malcolm Brown in either scenario. Bills at Raiders up next. This game is another one with a 50-plus point total, and the Bills are 3-point road favorites. How much we like Singletary will depend on the status of Zach Moss. If both are active, then both are low-end flex plays, with, again, Moss being more touchdown dependent, but Singletary, of course, having almost no upside, because it's just really frustrating that they refuse to use him. If you watched that game last week, he got the chance really early to score the touchdown, but aside from that, every single time they made it close, and they made it close a lot. They ran a lot of plays from inside the 10-yard line. They refused to use Singletary. It was pass attempts, it was Josh Allen designed runs, it was scrambles, it was anything they could do to not use Singletary. And so when Moss comes back, you have to realize that. Even when Singletary was the only guy, they didn't use him. Now, they're just going to use Moss when he comes back. But if Moss is out this week, then I think you can play him as running back too, because the Raiders are they're not that good of a run defense, not good defense in general. But if Moss is going to return, then I just don't love it as anything other than a low upside flex play. But again, if Moss is out, I think you can start Singletary. As for Jacobs, not an easy matchup, but when you have a high total game at home and you're getting that sort of volume that he's been seeing, you are a running back one every week. The game of the week will feature the New England Patriots traveling to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. This game has between a 53-54 point total depending on the site, and the Chiefs are 7-point home favorites. Rex Burkhead went off last week, gaining 49 yards and 2 touchdowns on 6 carries, and then another 49 yards and another score on 7 receptions. I think he finished as the running back 2.5 PPR. I don't know what it was in other formats, but he was a top 3 running back across the board. Not something you should expect moving forward. He's not going to score 3 touchdowns every week. The 10 targets are going to come down. He has been a great spot start with Harris on IR, and while White has been away from the team. But with Harris set to return this week, not confirmed, I want you guys to pay attention to that one. He's allowed to come off IR. He has returned to practice. I don't know right now if he'll be active on Sunday. You need to check that. If Harris is active and they're going to use all of Sony, Rex, and Harris, then I don't know. I think they're all pretty thin plays. The Chiefs are a much better defense than the Raiders, and this game will be on the road, so I wouldn't love it. But I guess if you needed to play one of them, Rex would be the guy because you can't really trust Harris coming off IR. You never really trust Sony because he doesn't have any role in the receiving game. And, they're willing to use Rex. We just saw him explode. So Rex would be the play, but I wouldn't want to use any of them. If Harris is still inactive, I think Rex is a stronger play, but I'm still only going to consider him a flex at best. I would not feel comfortable putting him as a running back 2. On the Chiefs side, not a good matchup, but you know what? Clyde Edwards-Helaire at home as a 7-point favorite. You're playing every single time. The Sunday night game will feature the Eagles at the 49ers, which isn't super exciting. The 49ers are 7-point home favorites, and the total is a pretty average 45 points. Wouldn't be shocked if this is a fairly boring game, especially since both these teams have been destroyed due to injuries. For the Eagles, pretty much always play Miles Sanders. I don't really care what the matchup is. You just got to play him when he's active. For the 49ers, depends on the status of Mostert. I don't think he'll play, but if he does, he'd be someone that I would be starting because he is pretty clearly the best running back on this roster. You'd want to see snap counts, like I always say with these players returning. If they say he'll be limited, okay, now don't start him. But if he's going to be a full go, then I would start him. If he's out, which I kind of think is going to happen, then it's a little tough to trust McKinnon and Wilson. Obviously, they both did really well last week, but that was a much different matchup. And both are still going to split the work, right? They did great because they had 3 combined touchdowns. But what are they going to do when they're not scoring the touchdowns in a more difficult matchup? We can't really know. And the Eagles are a very strong run defense. They do rank 4th in rush defense DVOA, 9th in yards per carry allowed. And like I said, the total is relatively low this week, so I wouldn't love it. So to reiterate, Mostert in. If he's not limited at all, he's the one you want to start. If Mostert's in and we kind of get a snap count, maybe don't start anyone. And then if Mostert is out, I don't love McKinnon and Wilson, but I guess if you're in a pinch and you got to start one of them, they're fine. And definitely it would be McKinnon better in PPR, Wilson better in other formats. The Monday night matchup will have the Falcons taking on the Packers and what will be the highest total game of the season so far. The Packers are currently 7-point home favorites, and the total is 57 to 58 points depending on the site, which is absolutely crazy. But it shouldn't shock us, right? These teams rank 1st and 6th in points per game, while both rank inside the top 12 in points allowed to opposing teams. And this actually is a matchup of the highest scoring team in the league going against the team that has allowed the most points per game. Obviously talking about the Packers offense going up against the Falcons defense. The breakdown is pretty simple because of that, honestly. We're starting Aaron Jones every week, especially when his team is projected to score over 30 points. So you got to be starting him. And we should be starting Gurley in this matchup. The Packers are fairly average in their run defense. And like I said, the Falcons are a touchdown underdogs. So Gurley isn't just this slam dunk to go off, but in the highest total game we might see all season, you probably want to be starting Gurley for that touchdown upside. I think that even if the Packers go off, like the Falcons are still going to score into the mid-20s. So because of that touchdown upside, you kind of got to play them. The final two games that I've saved are Steelers at Titans and Vikings at Texans. Now, as of recording this, we still don't know if those games are going to happen on Monday night or if they'll be postponed to later in the season. I believe it still depends on test results, and I don't know when they're going to announce that. Luckily for us, these breakdowns are fairly easy anyways, you know? I mean, at this point, you're starting James Conner, Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook every week, and you're not starting any of their backups. So those three teams are very easy if we get confirmation they're going to play. David Johnson honestly has a really nice matchup as a home favorite, so I would be starting him as a running back too as well, especially if the Vikings can't be practicing right now. I mean, they can't be getting as prepared as the Texans are, so maybe that's an advantage to the Texans. And when we saw this news come out, we did see the line shift more in favor of the Texans. The issue is, like I said, I don't know if these games are going to be played as of recording this. I mean, the games will be played, but I don't know if they'll be played this week or in the future. And so if you're sitting there on Sunday and you still don't know, which we're going to know. We're going to know on Sunday if the game's being played. But let's say you need to set your lineup for some reason on Friday night. It's risky, of course, putting one of these guys in there and not knowing if the game's going to be played. So at a bare minimum, pay attention. I'm sure you guys are going to, but pay attention. See if these games are definitely going to be played on Monday night or if they're going to have to move these games into further down the season because you don't want to take a 0, of course, right? So that's my breakdown of every backfield for week 4. If you want to see my exact rankings on every player, you can check that out at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. But that's the end of this one. Hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting that like button? And how about subscribing to the channel if you're new? But thanks for watching.